Okay, so as I suggested, Palm Sunday is a good day to talk about family systems, because really the story of Palm Sunday, that return, the return of Jesus into the place where he was going to be facing danger, that's really a good story about family systems and self-differentiation. But we'll talk about some other stories this morning. Here's one. It's March 1985, so 30 years ago. A grave in a dark, mossy cemetery near Spring Green, Wisconsin is quietly opened, its contents removed, and the earth piled untidily back in the ground. Only a few people know that the body of Frank Lloyd Wright is being taken from its resting place of 25 years to be cremated in nearby Madison. The exhumation papers had been signed by his daughter, Ivana, the daughter of his third wife, Olgivana, whose dying wish had been that the ashes of their two bodies should be mixed together and interred at Taliesin West in Arizona, 2,000 miles away. Wright's son, one of the 6 children he had with his first wife, his son David, called it grave robbing when he found out. After the news was made public, local officials wrote to Arizona to demand the return of the cremains. Much more than ashes have been taken from Wisconsin. The citizens of our state have lost one evidence of our history, spirit, and genius. Another one of Wright's sons describes the act as a desecration, while his granddaughter, Elizabeth Wright Ingraham, said, "I tried to sit on the fence, but I thought it was a gross miscalculation." But Ivana stood firm, and eventually a memorial garden was built in Arizona. Today, Taliesin West is the headquarters of the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, and it's a major tourist attraction. Has anyone been to the, oh my goodness, so many of you, wow, okay. But the memorial garden is not on the public tour, which tells you a little bit about the family system stuff behind the lovely facade, okay? All right, Bowen family theory, there are 8 core principles. Needless to say, this is something that I studied for several years and can be studied at lengthy workshops. So I can't in 25 minutes tell you all about it, but I can give you a few things that may be helpful to you going forward. So a couple of weeks ago, for those who were here, and if not, I think it's available on the website, a link, I talked about family systems and focused upon self and self-differentiation. Really, really key. I said then that only through differentiation, through finding and being a self, does one avoid the projection and transmission of one's emotional problems to the child. All right, for some of us, it's too late for that if we're only now figuring out about self-differentiation. We've already projected and transmitted them. But it's never too late to work on family systems. It's never too late to work on self. It's never, ever too late to work on these things. One becomes a solid self through differentiation. This is review. Differentiation means defining one's beliefs, values, commitments, and life principles. The things upon which one will base his or her life decisions and how one will behave in every circumstance of life. To the extent that we can do this, not be compromised or relinquish our values, especially in close relationships, we are differentiated. There is almost no one, says Bowen, who's 100% differentiated. We become and we live out of our solid self. As I said then, and I'll just repeat, it's like the Pilates of spirit and being. It's our core. And to the extent that we live out of that core and not be compromised, we are self-differentiated. Almost anyone can do this in isolation. It's the ability to do this and remain connected with others that is a key. It's the ability to do this and remain connected with our families and our families of origin that is really, really, really challenging. So, what are the other 7? Well, number 2 is triangles, and that's the one I'll talk quite a bit about today and touch briefly upon some of the others. Triangles. Triangulation is the basic building block of emotional systems. Humans are compelled to form triangles and do all the time. All of us form innumerable triangles because of their stability. You know, a relationship between 2 persons is unstable. Triangles relieve anxiety. So anytime that there are 2 people and there's some anxiety in the system, bringing in a third, whether it's a person or a thing we're talking about, it could just be, you know, work that we're talking about or the congregation that we're talking about. It doesn't have to be, or, you know, politics. It doesn't have to be a person, but the third entity that we're talking about relieves the anxiety of just you and me, okay? They're not bad. They're neither all good nor all bad. Talking with Michael this morning reminded me that a lot of people get a hold of that term, triangulation, and they kind of use it improperly. And I said, you know, that reminds me of when I used to be a EMT, and I actually went through courses to become an instructor of EMT, and I was a CPR instructor. This is in a way another lifetime, it was when I lived here before I went away and came back. But I taught CPR, and we used to tell people that knowing a little bit of CPR is worse than not knowing any CPR at all. Anybody's in the medical field, like, you know this. I mean, you wouldn't want to have somebody know a little bit about CPR and try to perform it on you, you know, and that's the way it is with things like this. People say, oh, you're triangling just because you're talking about a third person. No, we all talk about other people all the time. It's the key to understanding this is that triangles become destructive when they're used to manipulate, isolate, or antagonize individuals, or to undermine the healthy functioning within a system, a family, an organization, a workplace, or a community. And the key to understanding this is to be aware and to manage oneself, to continue to manage oneself in relationships. And Frank Lloyd Wright was a Unitarian. Seems like a lot of people know about him and have visited these places, so you may or may not have noticed while there that he was raised Unitarian, and he remained a Unitarian. I don't think we got any of the money, but, you know, he had all those kids, and so probably none of the money came to the Unitarian Association, if there was any left after all his philandering and all his marriages. But anyway, his father was actually a Baptist Unitarian minister, and his mother, a member of the Jenkins Lloyd Jones Unitarian family, very famous Unitarian family. Her uncle was Jenkins Lloyd Jones. So he grew up in this faith. And like many creative geniuses, his own life was chaotic. It was a dysfunctional mess. He's a great study for family systems. He himself was at the center, where are we now? So many interlocking triangles that it would be hard to diagram. His relationships, which is what we do when we begin to study family systems. We make what's called a genogram, and we plot on there not just a family tree, but all the functions and dysfunctions going on: alcoholism, mental illness, breakups, estrangement, and all that. And then we start to figure out where it all went wrong or right. He seemed to enjoy the position of creating disruption. It was said of him by one family member that he basked in scandal. And he did so even after his death, it seems. He wrote to his mother in 1910, kind of right at the height of his first bunch of infidelities with his first wife, "I am a house divided against itself by circumstances I cannot control." He wrote this to his own mother. Yeah. Self-differentiation, not so much. His impetuous and self-centered behavior can be explained by family systems principles. Number 3 and number 4 are the family projection process and nuclear family emotional system. Again, don't have time to go into all this, but there's lots available out there, and I can make recommendations if you'd like to read more. But those aren't our primary focus today. But they're at work when we look at his mother. She was abandoned by the father when he was 14. She focused exclusively intently upon her eldest son, and sibling order is number 6 in the list of 8 Bowen family theories. Sibling order is big. Those who are coming to the Safe and Healthy Congregations workshop, we're going to talk about sibling order today. Any first and eldest children in here? First and eldest. Okay, only children also raise your hand because you are the same as first and eldest, only worse. Okay, oh, we have a lot. Isn't that interesting that we have so many? She focused intently upon him and declared even before he was born that he would grow up to design great buildings. She actually hung pictures of cathedrals around his bassinet. And then emotional cutoff, which is number 7 in the list. Emotional cutoff is not just separating oneself from one's family of origin or from one's family with which one has difficulty, moving away, but also separating oneself by drinking, by drug addiction, and by all sorts of other methods by which one, creates distance. So you don't have to actually move away to cut off yourself from family of origin. It's the way that people manage their unresolved issues with their family. In Wright's case, he changed his middle name from Lincoln to Lloyd, which was the maternal family surname. And you've got this whole system in there that is just ripe for dysfunction. His inability to remain faithful and his well-documented ego were groomed not only through familial focus, but they were to some extent passed along to his offspring as well. In the case of one son, this was seen as a lifelong struggle to avoid being destroyed. That was what his son said about himself. But he justified his vanity, Wright did, by saying, early in life, I had to choose between honest arrogance and hypocritical humility. Isn't it terrible when you have that problem? Oh my gosh. I chose honest arrogance, he said. He's one of those Unitarians that we don't usually brag about too much. He was brilliant, though. He designed the Madison, Wisconsin UU Church. Anybody been there? I've been there several times, yeah. A great big triangle. It was just big triangles. One can't help but notice that we have a few of those here in the architecture at the UU congregation of the South Jersey Shore, as I was thinking about this. So we'll move at some point in a few minutes, we'll move from talking about families to talking about congregational life and see if we can make some connections. Multi-generational transmission is a key to understanding family systems and systems in congregations, which is really what I'm trying to plant some groundwork for. Whether you're a leader in this congregation or whether you're a member or just slightly involved and want to understand a little bit about what's going on. What's going on isn't just what seems to be going on in the surface. It's so much more because each person involved, there are human beings involved. And each one of us, including myself and your leaders and all of you, has a sibling position in their family, had parents, is bringing all of that to bear as we interact with one another here. Where's Art? What was your position in the family, Art? He's our president. Oldest? Yeah. Interesting. So whenever you... Interesting, she says. Whenever you... I've worked with so many congregational presidents because I've been a minister for 20 years, and generally every year or sometimes 2 years, depending on the congregation, I have to look at where I was in my family, middle child, but there's my little sister there, she's the baby in the family, middle child, but kind of functioned as the oldest. Wouldn't you say, Missy, that I kind of took over as the oldest, I'm the responsible one? Yeah, the others flaked out in various ways. So then I have to look at that vis-a-vis how I interact with the president and that president's role in the family, in their family. And it's always kind of predictable how we get along. It addresses how small differences in level of multi-generational transmission. Multi-generational transmission, just spend a minute on this. It's so interesting because if you're wondering, okay, if all this is decided by family systems, then how did, this happen in this branch of the family that people were fairly successful, fairly functional and fairly adapted, but over there we've got crazy Lulu going on, you know? It actually explains, Bowen Family Systems actually explains it because, for example, explains why Frank Lloyd Wright was chronically unfaithful, unable to sustain intimacy, and chronically dissatisfied and restless as his father was, because he never became aware or did the work, any of the work that we would call the work of self-differentiation. He became, in some sense, a victim of repetition. But it also explains the continued genius and determination to excel that persists through his offspring and many of their offspring. Bowen theorist Michael Kerr wrote, "The combination of parents actively shaping the development of their offspring, the offspring innately responding to their parents' attitudes, and the long dependency period of human offspring results in people developing levels of differentiation of self similar to their parents. However, relationship patterns often result in at least one member of a sibling group developing a little more self and another developing a little less self than the parents. And people tend to marry at about the same level of differentiation." So follow this down a family tree, okay? What is affected by differentiation of self is no small thing. Longevity, health, education, and occupational success. So you have this one who is a little less self-differentiated, marries someone at about the same level of differentiation. So let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, one of the kids is, a 55 or a 60, but one's only a 35, and marries somebody else who's only a 35, and they act out in that way, and those children, and so you get this one line of the family where people are chronically in trouble, going to jail, so forth and so on, and you get the situation, for example, Barack and Obama and his family are a great example of family systems. I would say that it's hard to find an example of someone today who is more self-differentiated than Barack Obama. Whatever you think of his politics, he is a self-differentiated leader. He has clarity, he does not, have you ever seen him react? He did a thing where he was on one of the late night talk shows, and I just saw it on Facebook, but he was reacting to tweets, Twitter things that people had posted about him. And he just laughed at them. I mean, there was almost, and these were nasty things that people said about him on Twitter. He made fun of them. I mean, there was almost nothing that people can throw at him that will, drive him off this calm, this non-anxious. I'm sure that he has a million things. He has things coming at him that would cause anybody extreme nightmares and anxiety. But he presents as a non-anxious presence. And he is clear, even when he is taking stands that are pretty far from what the people around him, are wanting him to do. It explains why he can be president of the United States, perhaps one of the most powerful humans alive and a highly self-differentiated leader, and his half-brother in Kenya, a struggling mechanic living in the slums of Kenya. Now, granted, there were different things going on because the father left, moved back to Africa, and so on. That's an extreme example of it. But you see what happens. There was some cutoff there because of the father leaving, but his biological father leaving. But when you go down a family tree and you have differences of self-differentiation, it's more and more easy to see how you can have this and your sibling or your cousin children can end up in widely different places. And little sister back there, we see that right in our own family. Our nieces and nephews way over here with college degrees and graduate degrees, and the other ones are somewhere, we don't know where they are sometimes, So that's generational transmission. Okay, back to congregations. No, finishing up on families. The great news about families is that generations-long family difficulties can be remedied or at least lessened. There is a place, you can come to a place of peace of mind with these family things. And I would encourage you to consider it. All it takes is conscious and conscientious work of one individual. That could be you. That could be you. Emotional cutoff is the result of unresolved attachments. The way to resolve these issues and gain greater clarity and freedom to restore balance, health, and sanity is not simple nor instantaneous, and it's very counterintuitive. Here are some things to do. You may not do these immediately, but you might consider them, and I can help you and give you more resources if you do consider doing them. Maintain active, intentional contact. I want to see the level of anxiety rise as I suggest these things. Get to know them better. Lately this week I heard about StoryCorps. Is everyone familiar with StoryCorps? We all listen to NPR, most of us do. And I did StoryCorps with my daughter about 8 or 9 years ago. She interviewed me when they came to Louisville. And I can't find our interview, but it's of course archived in the Library of Congress. But StoryCorps is where one family member interviews another family member and asks them all kinds of questions about their past and their history. There is now going to be a StoryCorps app so that everyone can have a StoryCorps on their phone and be interviewing. See, the sociologists are like, wow, everybody, we can get everybody's story. I mean, storytellers, I love stories so much. We can just go around interviewing everybody and getting their stories. And the idea of the sky is that everyone's stories will be archived. And of course somebody asks, well, who's ever going to listen to them? Who cares? I mean, and that really in family systems, it is like who cares, because simply listening to people's stories is healing. It's healing for you and it's healing for them. Make a family diagram, honor the family, research toxic issues without judgment, and explore these cutoffs. These things are healing. As hard as it may seem, it's easier than working with systems in congregations, which is what clergy and congregational leaders try to do. So, if you want to learn more about working in congregations, you're going to have to come to the Safe and Healthy Congregations Workshop. I'll just tell you a few things since we're coming to near the end of our time. When we're looking at congregations and systems, we're looking at anxiety. And anxiety is the source of triangles and triangulation, dysfunctional triangles, and it's the source of much of the dysfunction in families and organizations. So that is a key, anxiety. And I'm not talking about clinical anxiety like, oh, I don't have an anxiety disorder. I'm talking about anxiety. The characteristics of chronically anxious families are the same as those of chronically anxious institutions and societies. For example, our society now. Something happens and immediately everything goes out on the internet. You know, there's this plane crash, very tragic. Immediately you see this stuff coming across the internet. Oh my God, the guy was a Muslim. Oh my God, the guy was a terrorist. You know, the anxiety is just so on edge in our society now. Here are the characteristics. Reactivity, automatic response. Think about the congregation if you want to, if you're a leader. Think about families if you want to. Think about society if you want to. Think about your workplace, whatever is your present concern. Censorship, loss of playfulness. All right? These are indications of anxiety in the system. Hurting, togetherness. Organize around dysfunction. Adaptation to immaturity. 3, blame displacement. Litigiousness, I'm going to sue you. Blame placed outside. Focus on safety. Number 4, a quick fix mentality. Low pain threshold, simple answers, quest for certainty, and fundamentalism. Those are all characteristics of anxiety in a system. The amazing thing is that even one self-differentiated leader can make a difference. This could be you. This could be you. The non-anxious leader can broadly affect the entire emotional field. It's as if the leader's calm, reflective demeanor becomes an antibiotic warding off the toxicity of reactive behavior. And you're thinking, how can it be me? How can it be me? Terrorists in the church are no different than terrorists in the family or the public square from a system's perspective. The havoc they wreak is always enabled. I'm at the end of my talk here, but it's going to say something important. They are like a cancer that depends upon a hospitable environment to become malignant. They are always, according to Ed Friedman, who was a Bowen family systems theorist for congregations, rabbi, wrote Generation to Generation, that was kind of his opus. There are always three factors in survival: the physical reality, dumb luck, and the response of the organism. All we can do, all we can control is the third. All we can control is the third. As individuals who wish to become whole, genuine, and productive, as members of fragile but noble institutions like this, not just this congregation, but this institution, Unitarian Universalism, because we are seeing this on our institutional level as well as locally. As citizens of this potentially great nation with all its diversity, talent, and heart, we choose our response. We live life. It does not live us. That's really what self-differentiation is. I mean, Friedman sees this as theological because he sees immoral, unethical activity as invasive, unregulated behavior as evil. So for him, this is a moral issue because we, who can be self-differentiated, and I talked about this a few weeks ago, can respond and choose how to respond. Respond differently to nurture self-differentiation, boundaries, non-reactivity in the face of anxiety, to learn to live with challenge, risk. It's Palm Sunday, guys. Risk. And uncertainty. To focus on strength rather than pathology. To recognize that reactivity and sabotage are evidence of one's effectiveness. As soon as you see the sabotage, you're doing something right. All of these are to move toward integrity as a human individual, as a leader in an institution, and as a leader in society. Thus, and only thus, will we become free.